Hello, Jigs and Ghouls. Today I decided to don't do a straight horror story. Today I'm doing some Clark Aston Smith, some fantasy, but against Clark Aston Smith. So he's the granddaddy of dark fantasy. He's a guy who was in the Cthulhu mythos cycle. He's responsible for the Hyperborea and Zothique, and he used to be a poet, an illustrator, and out of the three greats of the early Lovecraft cycle, he was the one who actually lived to an old age, unlike Robert Howard and Howard Phillips Lovecraft. And today I'm talking about the story The Empire of Necromancers. A lot of his stories are about the island of Zothique, where necromancers live, and they perform their dark arts there, and his stories are often about them, their horrific actions, and what happens to them, how they are often punished, or sometimes they're rewarded too. He has written some straight horror stories, of course, and there are plenty of them in this book. However, I felt like we needed change of pace because it's been so many horror stories one after another. You can already see some of them feeling very similar. This one is fun. This one is a fun story about two necromancers. They left the island of Zothique and they go to a city where they plan to use their powers. However, people in that city revere the dead and they kick them away. They kick them into the desert. While walking in the desert with no water, no food, they stumble upon some dead horse and riders, and they resurrect them, and they flow into the desert, and they also resurrect every corpse they find in there until they find a ruined city that was hit by a plague. It was a capital of an empire that was hit by a plague and everybody died. So they plan to take over and establish an empire of necromancers. And they start by resurrecting workers, but then they go and resurrect the entire royal line of this city and use them as servants, as guards, as workers, even as lovers, because the dead girls never say no, I guess. But as they grow indulgent, they eat the foods preserved in this in the palace, drink the wines, and they have the dead serve them. They are getting fat and lazy, and their spells start to grow weaker. So the final descendant of the royal line and the first descendant of the royal dynasty, they confer as they start to find themselves, and the eldest one says that there used to be a prophecy that when evil worse than death will visit their city, there is a seal they have to break in the basement of the palace, and it will absolve them. So they do that. They go into a room where there is a sword, a key, and also the key leads to a well that ends in lava, in the still burning fires in the course of the earth. So the creator of a dynasty goes out. The spell of the necromancer has been broken, so he chops them into pieces, and when he does so, every person in the city, all of the undead, go and fall into the lava so they can be destroyed and be released by undeath. And when he's the final person in the palace, the establisher of the dynasty, who used to be a great wizard, uses the spell books of the necromancers to reanimate them, even though they're chopped into pieces. And then he goes into the door, locks it forever. He takes the key with him and falls into the lava again, leaving the two necromancers undead for eternity, chopped to pieces into a deserted city. And that's the end of the Empire of the Necromancers. And this is a great story, as you can understand. Again, there are two evil people performing evil deeds, and they are punished for this. And that's a satisfying story. It's a somewhat original story, have necromancers create an empire, a dynasty, by using the corpses of of a city that is destroyed, where everybody died by a plague. No similarities with 2020. They're punished by their own laziness, their own ignorance, their own greed. That's that's satisfying storytelling. Having bad people get their just desserts and being subjected to eternal torment for that. That's what I call a happy ending. Yeah, it's Clark Aston Smith. He has a great writing style. He is more poetic than Lovecraft, and he's got this way of writing that is very fast-paced. It doesn't feel very archaic. It feels quite modern for its era, and it's beautiful. The flow of words is beautiful. This story is a classic sort of sorcery, dark fantasy story, I guess, or you can call it horror. You can call it fantasy horror story because it's powerful. It's one of those stories that do work quite well, and it's a shame that Clark Aston Smith is forgotten while Lovecraft and Howard, to a lesser extent, are still remembered, because he had a rich body of work, very diverse work. He was also an artist and a poet, and his stories have this dark sense of humor and this grimness in them that is quite interesting. They're very dark. They're very dark in ways that most fantasy is not. And you can call it not the granddaddy, the great uncle of grimdark fiction. And those two necromancers do remind me of certain two necromancers from Malazan Book of the Fallen. Maybe they are some sort of a tribute to Clark Aston Smith, those two guys. Yes, if you haven't read Clark Aston Smith, go for it. You'll remember me. He's awesome. If you like old school horror and fantasy, he's awesome. He's not heroic fantasy, it's dark, but give him a read and you'll remember me. So that was our token fantasy story for this month. Tomorrow we're back into horror.